Honourable Member for St. James North.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and wish to commend the Attorney General and his team from the various departments on their service to country. First, wish to ask about the registration department and the efficiencies of the department and what processes are being used to try to improve its function and its timeliness and its customer service and ability to respond to the public's needs. We know that, for example, applications for probate or letters of administration of estates have been, over the years, taking too long a time. When I first started to practice, almost 40 years ago, I remember the first application I did for probate of a will took 4 months. It now takes much longer than that. I know that as recently as last month, a policy initiative has been made whereby those applications, new ones, are now made online. So, Attorney General, like either you or the Registrar of the Supreme Court, who is here to speak, let the public know what is being done to make the registration department more user-friendly and customer service oriented, and also as to whether we are satisfied that the registration office has enough hands on that deck manpower. We know that during COVID, as in most government departments, we had to cut back during COVID and when we went through the BREC program. But as to whether, whatever studies we have done has shown that there are enough hands on deck, enough officers employed by the registration office to fulfill the growing demand by the public on its services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The registration department has been a feature of our judicial system from time immemorial. Over the years, we have tweaked the registry. I believe that in your own professional life, you would remember the days when the registration department was the land registry and the company's registry as well, and dealt with everything. But in our time, we've seen the registry separated into separate elements. Land registry has gone off, the company's registry, the intellectual property offices. So the registry now, the registration department focuses on the administration of the courts, both the magistrates court and the high court, and the collection and management of vital statistics information, that is births, deaths, and so on, and also the probate department. In relation to the functioning of the registry, in as much as it serves the Supreme Court, a lot of that process is now automated because, as you know, for quite some time now, we have been filing documents, litigation documents online. Just today, I was looking at some documents that were served on me as Attorney General, and they were all filed online. We follow a model that is used by the Caribbean Court of Justice, and it is something that has worked very well and is efficient. In terms of the births, the vital statistics, births, deaths, and so on, it is planned that that responsibility will be taken away from the High Court Registry and be moved to the Electoral and Boundaries Commission where it more properly belongs. I believe, and I am not able to quote any historic research, but I believe that a lot of things devolved onto the registration office simply because it was a government agency that was seen as being in a central place. And therefore all births and deaths were sent to the registration department. But the fact is, the registration department as a body then does nothing with the statistics, the information. They don't process it. There's nothing that they're required to do with it except churn out birth and death certificates when called upon to do so. It has long been considered by this administration that the best place for collecting information relating to births and deaths are the people who actually use it, the people who prepare the voters list, the people who have to work out whether or not a person should be getting an ID card at the age of 16. What happens now is that the information comes in and then we do something called a data dump. Now this data dump used to take place it used to happen often in the earlier stages, but then it began to slip. So you would get a data dump every month. You would get a data dump every 3 months. So the electoral and boundaries would not know that a man or woman has died until sometimes many months after they have in fact passed on. We now have a situation where I believe the data dumps are done on a weekly basis. So all the information is to be sent to electoral and boundaries so that they can keep their registers up to date. But the truth is, it is an anachronistic process and really needs to leave the registration department. That is being worked on, and hopefully very soon you will see that happening. You will see the electoral and boundaries being responsible for the collection, collation, and management of our vital statistics. A gloss on that is that the registration of birth should not even be done by any registry, that act should be taken, should be managed at the place where it actually happens. So that where the person is born, the QH or something like that, should really be the entity, the body, the place responsible for certifying that a birth took place on any given time. The big challenge that we have in the registration department, though, has to do with the question of probate. There is absolutely no doubt that a large amount of national resources are tied up in a probate process. It's common sense, really. For as long as an individual is unable to administer an estate, you have assets that are locked away and cannot effectively be used for the generation of wealth, that can't be used to satisfy debts, that can't be used to allow people to get on with their lives. When we looked at the situation about 3 or so years ago, we found that the backlog was huge. The backlog was huge. My first initiative, in order to help to get rid of the backlog, Honourable Member, was to engage experienced attorneys who are experienced in probate matters, to review the probate files, and based on that review of the probate files, the files will go forward to the registry for sign-off. But it wasn't any probate file. Their job really was to help us to clear the backlog. So they went in. At one point in time, we had engaged as many as 5 senior attorneys, people with substantial experience in probate matters, and their job was to tackle the backlog, help us to get rid of the backlog. And therefore, by 2023, we found, when the project was successful, when we did the stats at the time, I was able to report to Cabinet, I believe even to this chamber, that we were behind by just 1 year, and that in almost all of the previous years, there was about 10% in each year of estates that had not been granted. And the reasons for that 10% being a residual quantum are myriad. Individuals have died. Sometimes lawyers have died. Individuals haven't paid fees, a whole set of things. So you had about 10% of probate matters that were just sitting there. And we are actually going to be communicating to all those applicants and lawyers and so on to see if we can try to see what we can dispatch. Currently, the corpus at the back of the backlog now is in the year 2023, and I've had discussions with the Chief Justice, and we're looking to get that sorted out as well. I can say to you though that by engaging additional staff, and we have engaged 1 or 2 additional staff members, we've begun to see some change. The process is now an online process. There are a number of systems that have now been employed so as to make sure that we can bring this specter of long waits for grants of letters of administration or letters testamentary, bring it from being a common feature to be only an occasional bother. We're looking to get rid of that very shortly. And I think that we've already begun to see those results. I had a very surprising WhatsApp message from an individual, came out of the blue. That person said to me that they filed an estate in January, and by last week, this time in February, they were able to get letters testamentary.
Thank you, AG. Mr. Chairman, I should have mentioned, of course, the registration department is program 241, sub-program 247. My supplementary relates to the magistrates court, which is, over which the registration department has some responsibility, and that's program 242, sub-program 249. And of course, we know, Mr. Chairman, that the majority of judicial matters, in fact, the vast majority, I believe maybe close to 90%, certainly over 80%, are heard in the magistrates' courts. And therefore, the question again arises as to the efficiency of the magistrates' courts in terms of administration of justice and implementation of the penalties, fines, which it imposes, and specifically as well, the maintenance, collection of child maintenance from, invariably fathers for support, financial support of their children. And, you know, over the years, both administrations, Mr. Chairman, there have been issues with, we hear, and certainly we know, I know as a fact, a collection of maintenance monies imposed by the magistrates court on fathers, collection by the mothers, and mothers, single mothers, already under tremendous financial pressure, not having the money which the court has placed on fathers in paternity matters or child maintenance matters. And Attorney General, Honourable Attorney General, I wish to give you or again the Registrar of the Supreme Court the opportunity to speak about what is being done to try to better manage this system so that you know, the fines, penalties imposed by the magistrates court on people can be collected, especially child maintenance cases. Is there technology that is being implemented to try to improve this system? Is it a case where we're training bailiffs better, court process officers better? I know of a matter years ago, Mr. Chairman, where a bailiff was to serve documents on a person who happened to be his neighbor and could not find the neighbor for months. Documents not served. So what is the government doing, your ministry, sir, to improve this system, make it more efficient?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your question is timely. In relation to payments, particularly, and you said particularly payments of maintenance to mothers, rarely fathers, the Magistrates Court is currently in the process of implementing a new case management and digital payment system to operate in all of its Magistrates Courts. There's currently a pilot project in place at the court at District D in Keene Garden. And at this point, what we're doing is inputting the data and testing the integrity of the system. What is happening now is focusing on the clerical and the front-end staff who are going to be the end users. What is key is that the method of disbursing the funding will not be what happens now, where a mother has to go to a court and collect cash, or where a father can only go and pay in cash and so on. We're going to be looking at a digital payment solution, and we've talked about this for a long time, but I'm very happy to say that we are at the point where we are in the pilot phase. We have 9 magistrates courts, Honourable Member, 9. And all of these magistrates courts, well, not all of them, as you would know, S complex will have a family court. The other magistrates, but all of the courts will be connected to this system, and we will be using a digital payment system very much like the Adopt a Family. Colleagues will remember that when we started the Adopt a Family program, the question was, how do we make the payments? Simple solution was that every household would get a digital card. They would have a card, the money gets added to the card, and they're able to go and take off and it as they need to. So we're not reinventing the wheel in that regard. We will not be paying out cash. This will allow for better accounting. It will allow for more effective use of individuals' times. You know, when you show up at a court and you hear that the court clerk out to lunch, can't get the child money. Court clerk comes in late, can't get the child money. This will remove all of those issues. So money comes in, money gets credited to your card, you go and you do it. And I'm really very proud of the work that we've done in this regard. I think you also mentioned the conditions of the magistrates' courts. As I said, we have 9. We all know that we've had some challenges in years past in relation to the physical condition of those courts, and in fact, we've had to close some. I'm sure you remember the court at Belle Plaine. Or you remember the court at District B. We've had to close a number of courts and try to rationalize that work. But I'm able to say that by doing the substantial renovation at the Fort Simmons complex, we've been able to allow our magistrates to use 3 fantastic courts down there, one of which is completely new. Thing that's used by the chief magistrate, but we refurbished 2 of the older courts so that we now have comfortable accommodation and accommodation that is free of environmental concerns. Honourable Member, we've had to close the Cemeteries Court. You know that the Cemeteries Court had the criminal, it had the civil, it had domestic. Cemeteries Court was an important center of activity for us, but unfortunately its condition. In fact, let's rewind a bit. The Sympathize Court used to be a primary school. So it isn't to say that we took a new building, that we took a place and built a new building. We took an old building and tried to turn it into a modern magistrates court complex. That has always presented difficulties. And therefore, we are now in a position where we've had to close that court, we've had to close that complex, and provided in the estimates for this year will be some work to start a completely new project at St. Matthias Courts. That is going to run over a 2-year period, financial year 2025-26 and 26-27. And the projected cost of that upgrade is the sum of $5,398,000. And so we're looking to do that work there. The magistrates courts are going to benefit from a significant computerization program, which is intended to start in the coming financial year as well. We're getting some support from donors from overseas, but I think most of the funding is going to be from us, and therefore we will see the magistracy and the magistrates court system benefiting from significant computerization in much the same way that the Supreme Court is computerized. Honourable member, there are going to be some decisions that we have to make, though, about the magistrates courts. The magistrates courts do not function all day, and that is a problem. That is a problem. It is a problem, in fact, when any of our courts do not function all day. Our police stations function all day, our schools function all day, all of the government departments will function all day. But unfortunately, we have some magistrates courts that start late and early. And that is not an efficient use of our facilities or our manpower. And I've had discussions with the Chief Justice and asked him to let us sit down and see how we can address those issues. I don't know if I've covered everything that you've raised, but if there's anything else, I'm happy to come back.
Thank you, Attorney General. Mr. Chairman, just checking, I have one more question or two. I'm allowed. Haven't asked two.
Is it a related question to your first question?
No, it isn't.
No, the standing orders say it must be related. There's
Well-
three supplementary questions.
Okay, well,
related to your first question.
I'll relate it then, sir. I'll relate it. Honourable Attorney General, of course, tied in with all of this is the issue of police and law enforcement. And
Honourable member, you can come back tomorrow. We have
okay,
gone past our time.
okay, no problem, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Honourable member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to first start out by congratulating the Honourable Minister and his team for all the work that they have done over the last year in terms of improving the lives of the most vulnerable persons in this country. Notice one of the strategic goals of the ministry is to eradicate intergenerational poverty in the short to medium term and in the long term to eliminate poverty on the whole. This is, of course, one of the issues that plague our country coming out of what colonial times, intergenerational poverty, and the more we can reduce that, the more we can reduce the amount of persons and the percentage of persons living below the poverty line in this country, the better. Of course, Mr. Chairman, a significant percentage of those who live below the poverty line are in fact persons with disabilities, and of course, as this Parliament knows full well, and as this country knows, this ministry has been the conduit through which, within the last 4 months, Parliament has implemented a national policy on disabilities, and just last month, Parliament has passed a Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, two acts by this Parliament, which I have certainly described as transformative, and among the pieces of legislation and policy with parliamentary approval, which rank among the most transformative ever passed in this Parliament. And I wish to ask the Honourable Minister, because as he referred to in last year's budget and budgetary and financial statements delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in the middle of March, the Parliament of Barbados agreed to approve the expansion of categories of persons with disabilities who receive benefits from the National Insurance Scheme. Previously, it was only those who were blind or who were deaf without speech, and this Parliament expanded from the 1st of October those benefits to include persons who suffer from autism, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome. And asking the minister if he would support, and I know the Honourable Member of Parliament for Christchurch East Central did, and I take this opportunity to commend him and place this on the records of Parliament. But both him and clearly the Honourable Prime Minister, who is the substantive Minister of Finance. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that all members of Parliament, including backbenchers like myself and those members in the Senate, have been invited to submit recommendations for the budgetary proposals for this year's budget. That is novel, and that is something which ought to be done. And certainly I have, in my submissions to the Honourable Minister of State, Ministry of Finance, proposed that Parliament expand these benefits which were expanded last year, and which the Honourable Minister has stated 653 additional persons are now beneficiaries to NIS benefits. And I propose that that be expanded to include children who are blind. In other words, those under 18 who are blind, those under 18 who are deaf, and those over 18, in other words, adults who have speech. And certainly that as a start, but also to expand the category to those who are mobility challenged as well. And my first question to the Minister is, and also to remove the prohibition which has been there, I believe, from the time National Insurance Act came into effect in 1967, 1968, that if you are a person with a disability and you are working for $30 a week or more, you cannot access benefits from national insurance, or you can't access invalidity or disability allowance. That $30 per week has never been adjusted in the almost, certainly over 50 years. It has been enforced, despite, of course, the rates of inflation increasing tremendously. And I wish to ask the Minister, Honourable Minister, if he and his ministry support the proposals to expand the category of persons who are now getting this benefits from the national insurance, and also to increase the amount of money a a person with a disability who may have found a piece of employment or a bit of self-employment, because we can be looking to encourage persons with disabilities to become employed in a situation where 90% of them are not employed or self-employed, but yet you're saying that once they're making over $30 a week, which can't go anywhere whatsoever in terms of their subsistence, that they are not entitled to a subsidiary benefit from the National Insurance Scheme. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, thank you as well for supporting what was done in the Ministry in relation to persons with disabilities, but I also have to thank you as you spearheaded the vast majority of it, and I want to publicly commend you for your work in relation to improving the lives of persons with disabilities in Barbados. There are very few people who would have done as much for persons with disabilities as you have, and as Minister, I really want to thank you for what you would have done. In relation to your two questions, in relation to the first, the categories that we expanded, as you rightly stated, were cerebral, that we included, that were previously not included, were cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, multiple sclerosis, and autism. And that added a number of persons to the list and were able to benefit from government support that weren't getting government support before. And I know that they're thankful because we've had meetings with the community. I think when the Prime Minister spoke, the Prime Minister said these categories, because these are the categories that we gave to the Prime Minister and these are the conversations that we had. But the Prime Minister's intention was always clear. The Prime Minister had intended for persons who were not able to function as Minister of Finance, for persons who were not able to function because of their disability, to be able to benefit from government support. And we had listed these four, but it was always the intention to support persons with disabilities who would be unable to function because of that disability. And the unfortunate reality has been that there have been some disabilities, some without name, that have made it impossible for people, for children, adults sometimes, to be able to function. But because they were not among these four, they were not able to benefit. So you have persons whose disability may leave them at home, a person whose parents is not able to work because they have to take care of the child, but they're not one of these four. So the correction has to be made, and I know that we would have spoken to the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, so he is aware that this has to be corrected, as well as the Minister of Labour, who has responsibility for the NAS. So I anticipate that this is going to be corrected very soon, and that the intention of the government, and specifically the intention of the Prime Minister when she supported the proposal, was for us to be able to give support to all persons who are unable to function because of their disability. So I hope that answers the first question. In relation to the second question, that has always bothered me. A few nights ago, there was a program on the radio with persons with disabilities. And one of the things that they spoke of as being their personal reality is if they were to attempt to go and get a job, immediately they're cut. They're cut almost immediately. If you go and you do a job and you're paid 1 day's salary, and NAS receives the information that you've been paid 1 day's salary, you're cut. So persons with disabilities have often chosen not to work a short-term job that could supplement the limited income that they get, because in so doing, they are affected by their long-term governmental support. Now that is obviously discriminatory, and that is obviously not the intention, and it should not be the policy of a forward-thinking administration. As a consequence, again, we would have had the conversation about correcting that. The minister responsible for Labour has told me that in the new work that he's bringing to this to this Parliament very soon, it is actually going to correct that. And it would allow persons with disabilities to also be able to work to a point. Because the idea is that if you're making enough money from a job, then you would not need the government support. But however they've, in conversations with us, however we frame it, it is going to be to take out that discrimination that is currently very much alive in the legislation. So beyond just supporting you, Honourable Member, we are working actively to remedy what is a wrong that I'm sure nobody wants to see perpetuated over time.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My first supplementary, Mr. Chairman, relates to education of persons with disabilities, and I note that the Honourable Minister of Education will also be intervening in this debate under this head and would have the opportunity to speak in terms of within that context as well. But of course, the National Policy and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill speak towards improvement in education for persons with disabilities. People who it has been accepted have been discriminated against for too long a period in terms of our educational system, which boasts about having quote-unquote free education for over 60 years, but yet, as we know, Honourable Minister firsthand from town hall meetings, certainly at the latest, that too many children with disabilities, their parents have to pay for their education. That's the practical effect. And the reality, in some cases, moving their children 9 times during the space of a school career, educational career. Giving you the opportunity, Honourable Minister, to speak towards now the implementation of improved education for persons with disabilities within the context of the national policy and the legislation.
Honourable Member, you and I would have sat through several sessions of the advisory committee where almost every single evening where we had these sessions, a parent of a child with disability would come and speak about the experiences in the educational system, some going back eons. Persons themselves with disabilities have also spoken about their experiences. We would have heard Janelle Oldell tell her story as part of the activities for the month of the disabled, and Senator Andwele also, and I think this year the Most Honourable Carrie-Ann Eiffel will tell her story in relation to her life experience, and so on. And almost without end and without question, it is always a case of the school environment was not necessarily the best. There's some experiences that were better than others and some that were not as good. But we would have had several meetings with the Ministry of Education, and I am comfortable that based on the conversations we've had with the ministry and the direction that I've seen the ministry go, as well as in their own writings beyond what we've written, I am satisfied that the Ministry of Education is moving at a quick pace in the right direction to rectify this. I suspect that if the Minister of Education were here, she would be able to tell you of the number of programs, because she's told me, the number of programs that are now being implemented to incorporate persons with disabilities in an inclusive fashion in the school environment. There are also going to be circumstances where persons with disabilities cannot be totally included, if we're being honest. And I know provisions are also being made to accommodate those as well. So I believe that children who have disabilities or the parents of children with disabilities can rest comforted in the fact that the Ministry of Education under the leadership of the member for St. Philip West is doing a remarkable job to rectify what really has been a circumstance that has discriminated against persons with disabilities for decades. In the ministry, additionally, we've also looked at some additional assistive devices. We were shown a pair of glasses. I've been telling my colleagues about it. A pair of glasses that if you are blind and you put on the glasses or you carry the glasses would say to you, if we were in this room, it could say to me, on my left, there are 3 persons sitting to your left. There are 4 persons to your right. And you say, what are the persons wearing? And I mean, ask the PS who was in the room. The glasses would tell you what the persons are wearing. We put in our estimates some monies to be able to begin having those kind of assistive devices so that persons with disabilities could have a better opportunity while at school. So, I really do feel comfortable with the direction that the country is going in relation to persons with disabilities. So it would be remiss of me not to thank at this moment the Minister of Education really for all the amazing transformation that is happening in that space to assist persons with disabilities.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My further supplementary, Mr. Chairman, relates to employment of persons with disabilities. And Honourable Minister, both you and I would have been party, as well, particularly you, to a hard decision taken, admitting that we as a country are not yet ready for a quota system for employment of persons with disabilities in either the private or public sector. We recognize that we're not at that stage yet, but surely we need to encourage government departments and the leaders of business and commerce in this country to employ more persons with disabilities. What plans or strategies does your ministry have going forward into this financial year in its estimates to war that so that we can reduce the numbers and percentage of persons with disabilities who are qualified and who merit the position, sir, and who are, in my opinion, more deserving than a lot of people who may not have disabilities in terms of being able to work. Because, and I was struck, Mr. Chairman, when I spoke in the debate on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill, when I mentioned that persons with disabilities who are given an opportunity to work perform very well, and the employers say so publicly. And I made the context that one of the reasons for that, they're so grateful to get a job. They're not on the phone, on Facebook, during the day working hours, or gossiping about who had who last night, or who planned to harm who tonight. They're doing the work. And what strategies do we have in these estimates, Honourable Minister, to try to create strategies and programs to increase employment rate among persons with disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. So you spoke of the quota system. Now, the quota system we had imagined, and in the first draft of the legislation, there was a quota system. We had anticipated that a percentage of the private sector's employees should be persons with disabilities. And we had an even larger percentage for the public service. And I think we deleted that particular clause very late in the process. And I must tell you, Honourable Member, that I labored on that for a long time because I really felt that there should have been a quota system originally. But the quota system doesn't always work. And there are countries with quotas where the quotas are never met. We met with the Chinese when they were here, the persons representing persons with disabilities from China, and they told us that they have a quota system, but that the quota system is never met. We had a consultant, a Canadian consultant who works, but they were consultant to the Barbados Council for the Disabled, but we had a conversation, and they were very much against quotas as well. And then the community of persons with disabilities in Barbados was also split about whether there should be quotas or not. What really influenced me in the end was that ultimately, I think we have to prepare people for work. And it would be difficult to insist that a private sector person or a government employer employs the persons with disabilities just because. And there were other things that we needed to fix. And that is why I was saying I'm really happy with what the Ministry of Education is doing, because we have to give people who have disabilities the same quality education so that they have the same chance as somebody else. And currently the system is that if you go for a job, let's say the job is asking for 5 CSCs, and a person would say to you, well, anybody with 5 CSCs can get this job, so I'm not discriminating against persons with disabilities, because if they had 5 CSCs, they would get the job. But that's perpetuating a discrimination, because the likelihood of a person with disabilities in our education system, as has been the case for generations, is that that person is very unlikely to have those CSCs. So you say the system is based on merit, but the merit that is built into the system is a discriminatory merit. So we have to make sure that we offer people a level of training. We have to make sure that they have the qualifications so that we could then say, look, these persons have the skills you want, and make sure that they can argue for the job in that case. We also have to train up a lot more persons, and we've been busy doing that. I think the acting director of the National Disabilities Unit, I think the director, permit me to say, Mr. John Hollingsworth, who is unwell, I would want to use this opportunity really to wish him the best wishes and the ministry's best regards, because he's done a lot of fantastic work, and the only reason he's not here is because he is unwell. But when we were having our conversations in relation to persons with disabilities, we spoke about the need for training. And we started a lot of that training. And we need to continue some of the training that we would have done. The last 2 points is, I think, in relation to being able to get people to hire persons with disabilities, we have to do a lot more PR. We have to do a lot more public relations. We have to do a lot more public education around the benefits, because there's this view that you have to make all these changes. And we've hired so many people with disabilities in the ministry, and we didn't really have to make any changes. The hardest change for people to make is the discrimination that exists in their minds. So Barbadians need to realize that people with disabilities have competencies and skills and should not be judged on one single thing. And in any event, the biggest disability really is the disability we carry when we practice this discrimination. And then the last thing in relation to the quota system that I would want to say is that I was torn, because I really felt that we needed to find a way to insist on getting people employed. But I took the points from the private sector that perhaps we needed to do some work first and engage in conversations. So you're not going to see necessarily a cost in here for those engagements, but we plan to work with the private sector toward voluntary compliance, so that a person would agree voluntarily to hire persons with disabilities. I would like to agree, when we have these conversations, that 3 or 4 are hired and it's done voluntarily. If we were to force it in the legislation based on where we were, I think we would have got malicious compliance. And malicious compliance is not really compliance, and it would not give us what we wanted. You may get a case where we say 2, and 2 is all they hire, as opposed to 10, and so on. So I think we have to really build from the ground up. I must also take this opportunity to thank the private sector associations, because they've come to the meetings, they've put forward their ideas, they've never been contentious, they have never been disagreeable, even where we disagreed. And I really want to thank the associations, all of them, because we've been able to do wonderful work with their support in that context. I would ask the acting director, Mr. Nurse, to speak perhaps to some things that are happening at the NDU that I think will foster greater relationships between persons with disabilities and the labor space.
Good afternoon. We are Nurse, Acting Director, National Disabilities Unit. We at the National Disabilities Unit, one of our goals is to remove the barriers to social inclusion. And one of these barriers to social inclusion is employment. So as the Right Minister said, Minister Hinkson, so what we are looking to do is to provide the training for persons with disabilities, to put them in a position that they could then advance into work. So we have programs running like the sign language program. We have Flower Project, Work Experience Program. So our plans for this year, though, we're going to continue working with the Ministry of Education with their artificial intelligence program, where persons with disabilities can get the chance to work in the area of cybersecurity and so on. Now, we have some reviews of persons who are actually involved in such programs, and some of them are still working and they enjoy the experience and so on. We're also going to continue to work with the Ministry of Labor in their Job Start program, once again looking for employment for persons, training and employment. Now, what we plan to do at the NDU, we want to introduce the Mangrove Agricultural Project, which will train persons with disabilities in food crop production. And we have entered into preliminary discussions with the Ministry of Agriculture. So you see, we're looking to involve other ministries and help us along as well. We plan to construct this sheltered workshop to teach persons with disabilities vocational skills. For example, the small engine repairs to wheelchairs. And so we have some plans for persons with disabilities to see how we can get them into employment, because we know that if we want them to improve, we got to make the create the opportunities for them to improve.
Thank you, Honourable Minister and Acting Director of the National Disabilities Unit. Mr. Chairman, my final supplementary relates to the trust fund which will be established under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and this is an extremely innovative idea and shows the vision of the Honourable Minister and his ministry and the committee too, sir, because I never take all the praise for it. The committee of which I chaired was an extremely competent committee. The Honourable Minister has called names of two persons who were on that committee, Mr. Neil Odell, Senator Andre Boyce, and the others who were on it, all either of whom had disabilities, the other half either parents or, in my case, sibling of a person with disability, and obviously the Council for the Disabled and people like Rosanna Truder. But you know, this trust fund which is to be established, which would be able to accept funding from philanthropists and donors and other such persons, and also where mainstream ministry can put in funds and for the benefit of persons with disabilities, the improvement of their lives. And just wondering, Honourable Minister, how you contemplate this fund working, and if again within the programs that you have within your estimates, where they can probably tie in with this trust fund when it is finally established. Thank you too, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. So as you know, the NDU is going to be part of the Social Empowerment Agency. So the funds that are assigned to the Social Empowerment Agency will be the funds that cover, in these estimates, that will be the funds that cover any operation for the Social Empowerment Agency, which would also include the funds that would be necessary to finance the various committees that we anticipate we're going to have to form, either at the SEA, Social Empowerment Agency, specifically through Child Protection or through the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill. So you're just going to see a lump sum of funds. You're not going to see the breakdown because it's a board. But in relation to the actual administration of the fund, the Act permits at Section 84 for the establishment of the fund. And it says that the sources of the fund shall comprise income generated by investment made by the trustees, because we have to appoint trustees, any other donations from international, regional, and local donors. And we have found in this particular space that there are many people who are willing to give financial support to the ministry, people who are willing to give, provided that they are sure that the monies that they give are going to the cause that they are putting their money to. What they don't want is for us to put the monies into a big black hole, as many people think the government's funds are, when everything goes to the consolidated fund. But in a board, we could actually manage the funds in a separate account, so that those funds will be separate. So for anybody who's interested in giving donations to that fund, once the Social Empowerment Agency bill is passed, then we will come back and we will establish these committees and so on. It also speaks to funds being contributed to capital expenses of projects undertaken by the government. There can be also funds in exceptional circumstances can be used to the payment of restitution to a person who has suffered a loss as a result of the conduct of a person with disability who is unfit to stand trial. So we are also anticipating that we would use these funds to help out persons with disabilities who find themselves in trouble. At the end of the day, the funds really have that overarching clause that allow us to apply the funds almost for anything that is in relation to improving the lives of persons with disabilities. I look forward to the various proposals that I anticipate will come for financial support, but I also look forward more so to us being able to put forward packages. You know, the public service is really good at a lot of things, but the public service is not very good at doing proposals to attract financing. And the public service is not good at doing proposals to attract financing because the public service traditionally has never really been in the business of doing proposals to attract financing. The public service operates in a way that they have a proposal or they have a project and they submit it to the government for financing. And with these new arrangements, you're going to see, I think, a whole set of creative approaches to being able to attract finances, being able to apply those finances to projects that are worthy of financing, and then for us to be able to assess the impact of those projects as well. I think the benefit of having different people finance a project is that you have different people who are invested, different people who have skin in the game. And it allows you to monitor those projects with a little bit more closeness. So again, I look forward to it, Minister. I do not know all of the various manifestations of support that will come, but I look forward to it. And I believe that in keeping with the bill, the persons who will be part of this board and part of the trustees will be persons with disabilities who I anticipate will be best able to pursue things in their own interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in thanking the Honourable Minister and his team for the work they've done and their responses, I wish to place on record for these estimates the names of the other members of the committee who, you know, and thank them for their service to this country. The Honourable Kerry-Ann Eiffel, FB, Granville Carter, BSS, Sonia Rollins, Larry Smith, Attorney at Law, Silk, and Joyanne Haig, and also the Director of the NDU, Substantive Director, John Hollingsworth, who the Minister mentioned in one of his responses, the other members of the, or were the other members of the committee. Thank you, sir.